Hello there, and a very warm welcome to another edition of Channels Beam. I am Victor Matthias. Now, according to a 2019 report by the Central Bank of Nigeria, it was estimated that over 1.2 million metric tons of poultry meat is smuggled into the country. Now, this opens a huge gap that must be filled either by private individuals, startups, or even government establishments, which will in turn further boost the economy and create employment for the teeming unemployed youths in the country. And joining us to find out how this gap can be filled or bridged is Kenneth Obiajulu. He is a disruptive innovation specialist with deep roots in agriculture, food security, and livelihood development. He is currently the co-founder and CEO of AgriCorp International, and he joins us via Zoom from Lagos. Kenneth, it's a pleasure to have you on the program today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Indeed, you're welcome. So let's begin with the availability of the requisite skill and even capacity, by farmers now, we can put it that way, poultry farmers, to fill this gap, that already exists in the country.
I mean, I believe that our farmers have the requisite knowledge, skill sets to be able to fill the gap. Availability of infrastructure for them to be able to increase productivity. Issues are around the costs of raw materials like feed and other inputs required. So I think our farmers have the requisite knowledge and expertise to be able to meet this gap.
All right, so let's look at investment, either in existing businesses or capacity building for those who are intending, to be part of this space. Where are we in terms of that?
So, I mean, I think that there are lots of poultry farmers in Nigeria that, like you rightly know, more than 80% of our farming population belong to the smallholder category, So there's also a need for us to be able to broaden their perspective when it comes to issues around medium to large scale production. So capacity building in the areas of how to be able to optimize or increase the production of what they're used to, right? How they're able to also reduce the losses that are incurred, during the production phases, as much as possible, trying to keep the mortality rates as low as possible would help in enhancing the volume that is made available to the public or to the market. But in terms of exact capacity building, interventions, we're talking about more around, veterinary services, in their productivity and reducing post-harvest losses, especially in the livestock value chain.
Okay, well, that seems to lead me to my next question, which is for those who already are, like you said, these farms exist, but one of the things that that is sometimes a problem is market access. I mean, let's even say, for someone like you now at AgriCorp, I mean, you have the access to the bigger market, so to speak. Now, what was the partnership possibility of a corporation like you, with small holdout farmers to give them this access to that wider market now, so to speak?
So I think, the market is huge. It's I think there's a lot more demand than even supply. So issues around access or in access of the market or the farmers to the market might not necessarily come up, right? As a major player, we produce all of our poultry ourselves in our facility in 3 locations. We also partner with smallholder farmers, in those various jurisdictions as well, to see how we're able to train them on good agronomic practices, to train them on, good livestock practices, and how they're able to connect their produce to our facilities to ensure that, they're able to have guaranteed supply, of their produce to, players like us and, other major processors and, market players as well. So I think it's not an issue of access to market. It's more of an issue of the market or the production not being substantially enough to meet up with the demand for poultry.
All right. I mean, if you're talking about the production being enough, the issue of investment will also coming. Where are the investors? I mean, because you're not only into poultry farming, you also have at AgriCorp. I mean, other stuff you're doing, of which you were able to raise about $17.5 million. So this is not from the outside. What about from the inside? And are you even on your own part? Are you investing in small holder farmers?
So I think that there's a large misinformation about what agriculture represents, and the perceived risk, associated with agriculture. What we have been able to do as a business has been to demonstrate our capacity to show that agriculture is profitable and it's a medium to long-term investment. I think one of the biggest challenges that lots of businesses or investors see in the market is the horizon for investment is not short-term. As such, it's very important for we businesses that are in agriculture and both in livestock and in the other areas to be able to demonstrate this capacity and de-risk these opportunities for investors to be able to see. So locally, we believe that there are several interventions that smallholder farmers, medium-scale and large-scale farmers have the capacity to be able to draw down on. I can begin to mention various finance opportunities locally, that lots of people can access, but the question is, do you have a robust model that has been slightly de-risked and has the capacity to be able to meet up with financial returns for financial partners, but at the same time also delivering on impact. So to the case of investors where they are, I think they're readily available. Everyone knows that agriculture and food markets is one of the biggest markets that Africa presents. The World Bank has estimated that the African food market will hit a $1 trillion mark by 2030. As such, I think there is a clamoring for investors to be able to take part of this pie, and it comes down to what models you're implementing and how you're able to provide a level of comfort for the investors to be able to make those investments both locally and internationally.
All right. Lastly, before I let you go, Kenneth, let's look at job creation, in the space. Of course, like I said, there are a lot of people who are out there who don't have jobs, but how can they come in this instance? How can they be a part of this? I mean, of course, by accessing all of the finance and all of that, how can they get jobs, or how can this sector create jobs for those who are willing and learning to follow, the blueprint like AgriCorp?
So one of the things that we've also seen is, in trying to demonstrate capacity for people to join the space, is go just in the hands of entrepreneurs, people that are agricultural, holding them by the hand and showing them how these things are done. A typical example of what we've been able to do over time. In our poultry program, we invested heavily in acquiring 3 million poultry annual poultry bed capacity, but we embedded an entrepreneurship program underneath our model, such that we own youth entrepreneurs that have zero to no knowledge of poultry. And because we know that poultry is not rocket science and it can be learned on the job, we have been able to support these entrepreneurs in demonstrating how to be able to grow poultry birds, how to be able to meet the numbers that is required. And in our last, circle, we were able to see that they were able to meet with industry standards and be able to scale from there. And we've been able to demonstrate that they have the capacity to be able to produce if you're able to hold their hand all through the way. And we're beginning to see even financially now making an attempt to invest in them. So I think that's what we're trying to do. And these are the ways to also get into the space.
All right, very well, Kenneth Obiajulu, I have to say thank you for joining us today and sharing your thoughts on this, and hopefully this gap that exists will be filled sooner rather than later. Thanks again for joining us on the program.
Thank you so much.
Of course, you're welcome. Well, let's now switch our focus to another economic boosting and job-creating endeavor. Earlier in October, Google hosted its inaugural Google for Africa event, where senior executives announced new commitments in Africa and Nigeria, including a pledge of $1 billion over 5 years to fund a variety of projects ranging from improved connectivity to investment in startups to help boost Africa's digital transformation. Well, now joining us is Olumide Balogun, Google's B2C marketing manager in sub-Saharan Africa, and he's also joining us via Zoom from Lagos to look at the specifics of these announcements. Olumide, it's a pleasure to have you on the program today.
Thanks for having me, Victor.
Of course. So let's start with specific terms of how these investments will benefit people and businesses in Nigeria.
So at Google, we really think about our mission when we approach investments such as this one. Our mission to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful has never been more relevant. And what we plan to do with this investment essentially is to look at 4 key areas that could make a meaningful impact here in Nigeria as well as across the continent. So first is really around how we drive affordable access with our Equiano undersea transatlantic cable, as well as partnerships with OEMs and telcos as well to drive affordable devices into the hands of people. The second is really our investments around small businesses and startups. We're investing into a lot of work streams there, essentially to help startups scale, affording them access to Google products, to Google network, as well as technologies, to help really take their businesses essentially to the next level. We're doing a lot of work as well in terms of how we build more helpful products, whether it is with us driving local Nigerian voices on maps or us building features on YouTube to help local creators essentially take the creativity that we see here in Nigeria and in Africa to the world. We see that this area is important as well for us to invest in. And finally, is really around how we help for nonprofits that are in the ground, in their communities, essentially solve for local problems that they see in their communities. So it's really around essentially, number one, access and how we drive affordability. Number two, how we help startups and small businesses. How we build helpful products is the third, and really finally, how we help for nonprofits essentially to scale in their communities.
All right, so it's good you make mention of the Equino sub cables, coming from the sea and all of that subsea cables now. But even before now, there was the Google station, which was launched sometime in 2018. But aside all of that, we also understand there is this non-interest loans to the tune of about $10 million, which would be made available to small businesses. Now, what are the criteria for accessing these loans, and how can small businesses access the loans? Of course, that's if they are eligible, when the loans are available, if they aren't yet.
We want to continue to play a helpful role with helping small businesses. Small businesses are the lifeblood of any economy. Whether it's a gentleman that's selling model spare parts in Alaba market, or a woman that's on the streets trying to make a living. What we want to do essentially with the small business loan is partner with local players on the ground that are in the business essentially of disbursing such loans. So we have selected a local partner here on the ground, Kiva, and we will be working with them over the coming weeks essentially to disburse and as well as to share a little bit more information on how businesses can partner or how businesses can essentially access these loans.
All right, what about the, what's it called, the investment, this time around, like the African Investment Fund for Black-led startups? Yeah, what's that all about, and how can that also, be beneficial to startups in Nigeria?
Over the last few years, we have done quite a bit of work working with startups here in Nigeria and across the continent. 80 startups, as an example, have gone through our Google Accelerator program. We're currently in class 6 of that, or the 6th iteration of that. And it's interesting, to note that some of the startups that have gone through this program are now unicorn startups. As an example, Flutterwave, went through that program. What we want to do with the Africa Investment Fund, investing into the future essentially, is a $50 million fund that helps Series A and beyond companies essentially scale. So we're really looking to companies that have similar strategic intent as with Google, and we're looking to essentially help those companies as well with funding as well as Google technologies and to help them scale their businesses here on the ground. In terms of how companies can access that fund, we have a team here at Google that's really working and staying very close to the ground, looking at startups that are solving for really key problems in their communities, and we will be reaching out to them to have engagements on how we can support.
All right, Olumide, just hold your thoughts for a second. We'll take a quick break, and of course, when we return, we'll get more on those announcements that were made earlier this year. Please stay with us. Well, thank you for staying with us. We still have with us Olumide Balogun. He is the Google B2C marketing manager in sub-Saharan Africa. He joins us via Zoom from Lagos. Olumide, again, let me just quickly come back to you to look at the impacts that all of the interventions Google has been making, because this is not the first time. I mean, over the years, Google has made announcements, which, of course, they've been following. But is there a mechanism to measure the impacts of all of this in Nigeria, especially? Quickly.
Impact is really at the center of this investment. When we think about how we make this investment into the continent and Nigeria by extension of impact, whether it's from when I talked about Equiano and the investment that we're making on the sea cable there, we have done some in-house research, and we're seeing that we could have an impact in terms of just increasing the speed of internet connectivity by 5-fold over the next 5 years. We also see that there could be an impact in terms of just how we continue to make the internet more affordable, so up to 21% reduction in the price of internet. We do see that there will be an impact on indirect jobs created as well, up to 1.6 million indirect jobs. What we have seen in the past is really on the impact side is a lot of work we've done on the digital skilling side. When we talk about how businesses and people here on the continent continue to digitize, we continue to drive digital skills, training. So far, we have trained 5 million people here on the continent, 3.4 million in Nigeria to be more specific. And so this is just to mention a few of the impact numbers that we're seeing, from some of the investments that we've made in the past, but also quite excited about, the impact that we hope to achieve in the future investments as well.
Well, we'll be looking forward to that, and of course, hopefully it will impact those who actually need the intervention when that time comes. But I have to say thank you for joining us today on the program, Olumide Balogun, Google's B2C manager, in sub-Saharan Africa. Thanks once again for joining us today on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Indeed, you're welcome. Now, with only 1 in 10 women reporting the case of sexual violence to the police, the United Nations is marking the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence to create global awareness on the menace. And we're now joined by Olajide Abiose. He is the CEO of the CANS, a Center for Citizens Welfare and Civic Development in Africa, to look at how technology can be employed in this regard. It's a pleasure to have you on the program.
Absolutely mine. Thank you very much for bringing me here.
Of course. So let's, as you know, the 16 days of activism is still ongoing till December the 10th, of which it started from, November the 25th. But let's look at how technology now can play a key role in ensuring that gender-based violence, is highly, prevented in the country and even globally, generally.
All right. So essentially, the problem of GBV is underestimated, and COVID-19 really brought it to light how big the problem is. We can see that during the lockdowns, victims particularly were in the same space as their oppressors, and during that particular period, the amount of cases that were coming to light really showed that there was a real GBV emergency, and we started looking at how technology can address this problem and give some sort of opportunity for the victims to get justice. So really, the first thing was, how do you get people to speak up? How do you get people to report and bring cases to light without being victimized for speaking up? So we needed to see what technology tools can be introduced to people. How can people use mobile technologies, use apps, or feature technologies like IVR, interactive voice response, and USSD to get out cases to those who can provide some sort of response and care, particularly in the cases of health emergency that always result from this violence against women. So we created a tool called the Unsub app in partnership with a couple of organizations that are set up to address the cases of gender-based violence. Unsub allows people to use mobile and web technologies and even technologies like the USSD and IVR to report when they experience both all the different forms of GBV, domestic violence, intimate partner violence, infanticide, and all the other forms. So Unsub allows them report these cases online and immediately first responders who are signed up as stakeholders on the platform, who are mapped to address different forms of the violence, take up these cases, contact the victims. The victims' identities are protected, so the report is anonymous, and they reach out to the contacts added when the cases were reported, and immediately the victims are taken through a process that allows them get some form of intervention and possible closure of the cases. So we've seen how technology can actually change or make an impact in the dynamics of the gender-based violence problem. And the good news is we're also not just working as CSOs or private sector players. We're working with government institutions, because ultimately what we want to drive is use these platforms to get as much data as possible to drive policy and intervention from the institutions of government set up to actually address these problems.
All right, so you spoke about anonymity, which is one of the key reasons why, about one or only 1 in 10 women reports, their issues or their cases of GBV to the police so as to get help. So the issue of security now, how watertight is your security? How sure are you that a hacker cannot hack that application to, access data of who has sent what to where?
So I'll be quite honest. There's no technology that is completely hack-proof. That's clear. But what we try to do is employ world-class practices and standard practices in protecting people's data, and also sometimes data protection is not just about classy technology or high-end technology. It's really about little practices like how do people take out data from the system and making sure all the people that use the system, including the stakeholders that are providing support, know to follow a standardized set of protocols before taking out data or using people's data for specific purposes. You can achieve more by just creating protocols that guide the use of victim or survivor data rather than implementing very high-level tech, because really there's no technology.
The top 5.
There's no technology that is completely hack-proof. So we just follow standardized protocols, and we use the best technologies available, cloud, with all the necessary security protocols.
Hope that, that technology is never, breached at any point in time. And hopefully all of the cases that are reported, hopefully all of the cases that are reported also, justice will be gotten for the victims who make bold to report their cases of GBV. But I have to say thank you again to you also for joining us on the program today.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure.
And that's the show today. We'll leave you with the most viewed videos on our YouTube channel in the past week. I'm Victor Matthias. Bye for now.
The reaction of a lawyer to remarks made by Information Minister Lai Mohammed bashing the report of the Lagos State Judicial Panel on NSAS kicks off this week's top 5 videos.
And when I was listening or hearing or reading what the very interesting Minister of Information had to say, I was just smiling and feeling sad at the same time, not only because he's a minister, but it happens, they said he's a lawyer.
It is followed by the full video of the 2021 Wole Olanikpekun Justice Summit held in Lagos.
A variety of the major cases that he has been in, and many of which he has won.
Third Sports sees the parade of a police corporal and others as alleged ritualists and armed robbers.
We are doing our investigation And by the time we conclude, we will do all administrative work that we're supposed to do on the two of them, and then charge them to court appropriately.
Taken, the second sport this week is the attack by bandits on the Kaduna-Abuja Expressway, which led to the kidnap of many and death of a chieftain of the ruling All Progressives Congress.
God! What did I tell you? See the
While topping the chart is the gun battle between operatives of the Anambra Police Command led by the commissioner and gunmen at a market in the state, which resulted in the death of 5 people.